Hi there and welcome to the Blogger's Guide to Cruising. I'm Julie Peasgood and today I'm joined by a travel writer whose first assignment was nearly his last. Now picture the scene. You're driving from London to Timbuktu and back, but on your return you break down and you find yourself stranded in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Well, it happened to Peter Hughes. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. How did you get home?
It's an extraordinary story. I mean, the bit you missed out is that I was trying to do it in a saloon car, an ordinary family car.
Not the best
I was working for a magazine, and the original idea was to do it in the Range Rover, which was new. And then Range Rover looked at the project and thought it was too risky for a new vehicle. If it all went wrong, that was going to be it. So we did it in a bog standard Ford, and it did break down, as you say, and we were rescued by a band of German smugglers and taken back down into Gao, which was in Mali.
Because of course Timbuktu in Mali in West Africa as well, because lots of people think Timbuktu, you know, fictional, but no, it's real.
No, it's an extraordinary place and historically a very important place.
Right. Yeah. Were you, I just have to ask, were you German smugglers, I mean, were you scared at all when they approached you, or were you just so relieved to be rescued?
We were quite sort of blasé in a way, because we had food and water, water in particular, and we were also on the trail. It's quite well marked, only by vehicle tracks, although the French years ago put drums, different sized drums at different kilometre intervals. So the track was marked, and we weren't off the track. You get off the track, then you've had it, because no one will find you. They have no idea where to look.
Gosh.
So we knew that we would eventually, and we were trying to come back north, and this group came south, and they said, "Are you okay?" And we said, "Yeah, we're fine. Do you want a lift?" We'll wait for someone going north. So they shoved off. And the next thing was that they came back again. One of them said, "Look, we're travelling with a local truck driver, and he says you might have nothing going north for another 2 weeks." So we said, "Right, thank you very much. We'll come with you," and retraced our steps.
Oh, that's extraordinary.
Back into Mali.
Okay, so that was obviously a land-based trip. Cruising. Do you remember well, I'm sure you do. What was your first cruise?
Well, my first cruise, in a sense, my first shipboard experience was on the old Queen Elizabeth, and I went to school on it, by which I mean that I was involved in one of these exchange programs, and at the age of 17, I went to America for a year as an English-speaking union exchange student, and travelled out on the old Queen Elizabeth. And I had a shipboard romance with a young American girl.
Good for you.
Very platonic, but she was in first class, and we found one door that was always open between steerage, where I was, and we could wander up and wander hand in hand around the lifeboats.
Gosh, so was that experience? I mean, my first cruising experience was on the QE2 as well. Amazing.
QE1,
Sorry,
mine was.
Yours QE1.
Yes.
Crumbs.
Yes. Oh yes.
Okay, so did that sow the seed for a lifetime love of cruising?
I think it helped. I've always liked the sea. I have a lot of sort of naval background in my family, not myself, but a lot of my family have been involved in the Navy, and so that I think has washed off. But I actually came to cruising later, almost by accident. I mean, I just happened to be doing a job, and someone said, "Have you got a passport? Okay, go away and start a holiday program."
The most famous, iconic holiday programme of all time. Wish you were here.
Well, you're very kind. I mean, in its day, we had audiences. Our biggest audience was 18 million.
I can believe it. Yeah.
But that obviously we covered cruising in that, and so that was that got me into cruising then.
Okie doke. And now you're very much into expedition cruising and small ship specialising in small ships. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my test for a cruise is that a ship makes sense if there's no other way of doing it. And if you're going to the Antarctic, basically there's no other way of doing it. Or if you're going into the Arctic Ocean, or if you're going into jungle areas of Central America or around the coast of Australia. So small ships will do this, and they're quite different. They are different size of ship, different type of ship, they do different things, and they go to different places. And in my book, that's making really good use of a ship.
I think that's a great way to define it. Have you done normal cruising as well? I mean,
oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, when I left Wish You Were Here, I and a colleague made films for P&O for 10 years. So from the first one that I was involved in was the launch of Oriana.
Okay.
And we made a film on the launch of Oriana, which was an extraordinary thing because it was built inland. It was built in Germany on a river. And,
really?
It was quite a big ship in its day. You know, it was 70,000 tons. Well, the new Royal Caribbean now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like 270,000 tons. You know,
floating hotel. But I mean,
so Oriana was about 70,000 tons, if I remember right, and they had to float it down the river. They had to dredge the river to get it out to sea.
Gosh. Oh. Okay. And do you still ever go on any sort of cruises that aren't expedition cruises?
Yes, indeed. I did a very pleasant cruise in the Mediterranean last year with Regent, and I hadn't been on Regent before. And it was a Regent Mariner, very nice ship, interesting approach where it was all the excursions were included. And I thought that was a very good arrangement.
Yes.
Because you could use the excursions to your own benefit.
Yes.
So you could use the shore tenders or the buses or whatever transportation they were using on shore to take you where you wanted to go. And then you could either join a group with a guide, or you could do your own thing.
Yeah.
And I went to Ravello on one and decided just to do my own thing so I could use the ship transportation.
Yes.
Totally legitimately. I wasn't cheating. You know?
Exactly. No, it's
and they even provided me with tickets into the Ravello Gardens.
Yes.
So that, yes, I do. I do normal cruising as well.
I'm a great fan of Regent, and I think a lot of people, when they come to sort of luxury level ships, think, gosh, it's very expensive. But when you cost it all down, the fact that you do get your excursions included, your gratuities included and the things, it's actually not too much of a differential often, because the excursions can really bump your price up. With expedition cruising, let's go back to that, that presumably, I've not actually done expedition cruising as such. Is everything included there, excursion-wise? Because it's mostly so destination-driven, and that's mostly it.
It tends to be. Your excursions, again, they're different. You'll go ashore almost certainly in little inflatables called Zodiacs.
Yes.
So one of the things about expedition cruising is you have to moderately fit. You have to be relatively agile just to get in and out of a Zodiac. And the thing about a Zodiac is it'll take you straight up onto the beach. So, you know, you look, at my age, you look like a sort of octogen, well, no, I'm not octogenarian, but
no, you're not.
An old-age landing party, you know, sort of D-Day veterans all staggering out of these things. So you have to be relatively agile, and that will take you ashore.
Right.
And it's a huge advantage because it'll, I mean, I've done 2 Antarctic cruises this year, and you land in the middle of a penguin colony. And so you climb out and you try not to trip over a seal, and you walk in amongst the penguins, and you're not allowed to go, or you're not supposed to go within 5 meters of a penguin, and everybody tries very hard not to, but no one's told the penguins.
And are they quite used to you? They don't sort of...
They pay no attention to you whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah, I've only once seen a penguin, and I can't even say it was disturbed. They have what they call penguin highways, and they wear these tracks because they're feeding their chicks, and so the adults have to go down to the sea to get food, which is tiny little prawn-like thing called krill, and then they come back with that and feed the chick. And so they wear these little trenches, which they call penguin highways, and that's their way down to the sea. And I once saw someone inadvertently stand in front of one of these things, and the penguin thought, hang on a moment, what are you doing here? But they're completely unfazed by it.
Oh, wow. Peter, don't go away. So much more to chat about. Please stay with us, and please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to the Blogger's Guide to Cruising, and travel writer Peter Hughes is still with me. Peter, I know you've done zillions, so it's hard to pin down one in particular or a couple. Most exciting shore excursion you've been on?
I think the most exciting, I'm sorry, it would be an expedition, but that's the whole point of expeditions, because they are exciting, they are adventures. And for me, it was going to the heroic explorers' huts, that is Captain Scott's hut and Shackleton's hut in the Ross Sea. And I gave up a month to join an icebreaker to get down there, because it's very remote and a normal cruise wouldn't go down there. The cruises to the Antarctic normally just do the peninsula, which is up at the top, comes up towards South America. And we got down there and there was too much ice and we couldn't get in. Now the icebreaker would have been able to eventually to break its way through, but it would have taken a long time. Fortunately, it had helicopters on board, but it was just too far for the helicopters, so I thought I'd given all this time, and all I really wanted to do was step inside Scott's hut.
Yes.
And then the ice shifted, and we were able to fly in and walk into the hut. And that
amazing?
Was deeply moving.
Yes, yes, I bet it was.
People have written about it and said that they could believe that the explorers could come back at any time. I didn't feel that. Right. There is a sort of slightly sort of musty smell, or you can still smell the pony tack and this sort of thing. And all the most moving thing for me was that above Edward Wilson's bed and bunk, and he was Scott's number 2, and there were all these things. There were still candles there with the drools of wax going down. There were all their cooking utensils. Their beds were still made as they left them. And above Wilson's bunk was this little enamel mug with a toothbrush in it. Oh, yes, exactly. It's tiny, tiny things like that, isn't it? That so human, that just get us. And they never came back. No. You know, they died on their way back from the pole. Gosh. So that was an extraordinary experience. Yes. And made extra special, if you like, because so few people can do it because of the prevailing conditions to actually get there. Yes, it's a rare experience. There are a few ships that go down there. There is no icebreaker now. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think any icebreaker is now operating passengers in the Antarctic, but there are very strong ice-strengthened ships, which, if the ice is okay, will go down. Travelling alone, which I know you've done a lot, obviously, as a writer and presenter. Any tips for people? Do you think it is a good holiday? I do. I think it's an excellent holiday, because particularly for women as well, if I may say, I think, women feel safe. They know that cruise companies also are very good about introducing solo passengers so that they are not left on their own. They will know who the others are. Yes. They're able to mix. And my only comment would be that some of the solo supplements are a bit steep, but that's the same on shore as well. Yeah. But no, it's a very good way, because you meet people. And the last trip I did, there were which was on a German ship, and there was a group of about a dozen Brits, and we all got together because because of the language, and all became good friends. And so much to ask you. I've just got to touch a little bit more on Wish You Were Here. After you'd left, I actually presented for it on a few occasions. It must have been, you were 20 years there. I was, yes. And it was extraordinary because the BBC holiday programme had been going for 5 years, and then literally I was working at Thames Television doing something completely different. And my boss came in one morning and said, "Do you have a passport?" So I said, "Yes, I have." So he said, "Well, we'd like you to start a holiday programme."
Oh, really?
So there were two of us.
There's an offer.
Very good friend Steve Minchin and I. And we hadn't really given it a lot of thought. And I remember we went out on a sort of survey to Mallorca, and he and I were together in an airport hotel at Gatwick with a load of brochures looking and thinking, where should we go and what we should sow from small acorns.
Gosh.
But it was an extraordinary time. And,
yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Land-based travel for you versus cruises? I mean, you'd still love both, or do you have a preference?
I don't think I prefer one above the other. I mean, it depends very much what one is doing. Literally yesterday I just came back from Sweden, which was land-based, and I just had a car and drove up through the middle of Sweden,
right.
Which was fabulous, and that was a very good experience.
Yeah.
But then my next trip on Monday, I'm taking a goulette through Croatia, the Croatian islands. So I wouldn't, I'm just jolly lucky to be able to do either of them, let alone both.
And how many passports have you gone through since wish you were here in the early days? Peter, you've won masses of travel awards, justifiably so for your writing. Do you have any tips for aspiring bloggers who may be watching the programme? Any tips for cruise writers?
Always trust your first impressions. When you first go to a place, almost certainly what you see is going to be what is worth remembering and what would stick and what you should be telling other people.
Right.
I think one of the risks of travel writing is and I don't think it's blasé, you won't last if you get blasé and you don't still have the thrill about doing it. But one of the risks is that you can get too familiar and you forget what someone seeing somewhere for the first place is going to see. I always get very angry with people who say, "Oh, you should have been here 10 years ago and won't like this at all." Absolute rubbish. You should be here now because everybody, my children are going to travel and they will see somewhere for the first time. And are they going to say in 20 years' time, "Oh, you should have seen it in that
yes.
day"? No, of course they're not. Well,
yes.
they may, but they shouldn't.
No.
So there is an excitement about travel and we shouldn't lose it.
No, that's an excellent point. I remember going to Prague and people saying, "Oh yes, lovely, but you should have been here then." And you feel then that you've missed out slightly, which is not the feeling. What's the award you're most proud of? I mean, I know you did so much for tiger tourism, for instance, after the tiger was killed in India.
Well, I did, yes. I think the Travel Writer of the Year was one of those awards was for writing about tigers. And tourism takes a lot of flack, and often justifiably. But tourism also, if it's properly managed and properly used, is very valuable. The tiger is one very good example. The tiger is much better off with people going to look at it and people experiencing it and people caring about it. The Indians tried to they tried to close their tiger parks, and they didn't succeed, but the government wanted to do that about 2-3 years ago, and that would have been disastrous because no one would have known what was happening to the tiger. Poaching, the whole battle against poaching is helped by the more people who see the results of poaching and understand and hear what happens to animals that are poached, particularly in Africa where they just take, rhino horns, leave these wretched animals brutalized. So I think tourism has a huge role to play, but you've got to be very careful. And if you look at the figures, the number of people actually going on holiday, travelling at the moment is tiny. It's growing all the time. Just to go back to the Antarctic, The third biggest nation of travellers in the Antarctic now are the Chinese. They've displaced us and the Germans.
Gosh, really?
So the Americans are the biggest number,
Yeah.
then the Australians, now the Chinese. And the Chinese are going to build ships that will go to the Antarctic. And quite right, why shouldn't they? And they're fascinated by it. The Chinese like anywhere beginning with an A. They like the Arctic, Africa and the Antarctic. But it is going to put more stress on these places. Yeah. You know, the numbers going to the Antarctic now is fewer than 40,000. So that if you increase that number, those places which are relatively limited in number, there will become a time where there are just going to be too many people trying to get in. And, you know, tourism has got to recognise that.
Yes, and be responsible.
And be responsible.
Yeah.
And as tourists, you know, we're going to come to the time where we've got to recognise that Venice is like a cinema. And when it's full, you won't get in. And one is getting to that point, you know. And everybody wants to see the same sights. And all those people, the Indians, for example, are travelling a lot now, as well as the Chinese. All these countries which haven't hitherto travelled want to do it, and they're going to want to do exactly what traditionally the people in Europe and America have done.
Yeah. Peter, thank you. It's been a complete delight talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I could chat to you for hours. I really could. And thanks to you for watching. I'll see you next time with another edition of the Blogger's Guide to Cruising. Bye for now.